Now, let's move on to Chapter 4, Section 2, the Greek City-States. Polis, the center of Greek life. The polis, or city-state, was the central focus of Greek. The citizens of polis had defined rights and responsibilities as well as strong identity and loyalty that kept the city-states divided. By 750 BC, the city-state, or what the Greeks called the polis, became the central focus of Greek life. Our word politics is derived from the Greek word polis. In a physical sense, the polis was a town, a city, or even a village, along with its surrounding countryside. The town, city, or village served as the center of the polis, where people could meet for political, social, and religious activities. Next, organization of the city-states. So, the main gathering place in a polis was usually a hill. At the top of the hill was a fortified area called an Acropolis. The Acropolis serves as a place of refuge during an attack and sometimes came to be a religious center on which temples and public buildings were built. Below the Acropolis was an agora. Agora is an open area that served as a place where people could assemble and as a market. City-states varied greatly in size, from a few square miles to a few hundred square miles. They also varied in population. Athens had a population of more than 300,000 by the 5th century BC, but most city-states were much smaller, consisting of only a few hundred to several thousands of people. Temples and public buildings were located within the Acropolis. The Parthian, a temple dedicated to the goddess Athena, is a part of the ancient Athenian Acropolis. The Greek polis, or city-state, was built near a rocky hill that could be easily fortified and defended, and the Acropolis, or fortified area, provided a place of refuge for people in times of war. Community of the state. The polis was, above all, a community of people who shared a common identity and common goals. As a community, the polis consisted of citizens with political rights, citizens with no political rights, and non-citizens, including agricultural laborers, slaves, and residential aliens. Citizens had rights, but these rights were coupled with responsibilities. The Greek philosopher Aristotle argued that a citizen did not belong not just to himself or herself. We must rather regard every citizen as belonging to the state. In earlier times, nobles on horseback fought wars in Greece. These aristocrats, who were large landowners, also dominated the political life of their city-states. By 700 BC, however, the military system was based on hoplites, who were heavily armed infantry soldiers or foot soldiers. Each carried a round shield, a short sword, and a thrusting spear about 9 feet or 2.7 meter long. Hoplites went into the battle as a unit, marching shoulder to shoulder in a rectangular formation known as phalanx. This close formation created a wall of shields to protect the hoplites as long as they kept their order. It was difficult for enemies to harm them. So, ang use of phalanx or formation nila, which is forms like a rectangular, for them to keep in order and for the enemies to have a hard time on harming them or one of their members. Greek colonies. Across the Mediterranean, new Greek colonies were established along the coastlines of southern Italy, southern France, eastern Spain, and northern Africa, west of Egypt. At the same time, to the north, the Greeks set up colonies in Thrace, where they sought good farmland to grow grains. The Greeks also settled on the shores of Black Sea, setting up cities in the Hellespont and the Bosphorus Straits. The most notable of these cities was Byzantium. Byzantium, the site of what later became Constantinople and is now Istanbul. In establishing these colonies, the Greeks spread their culture and political ideas throughout the Mediterranean, securing control of the straits and waterways between the Mediterranean and Black Seas also gave the Greeks great economic advantages. Colonization in these prime port locations led to increased trade in industry. The Greeks the Greeks on the mainland exported pottery, wine, and olive oil. The Greeks on the mainland exported pottery, wine, and olive oil. In return, they received grains and metals from the west and fish, timber, wheat, metals, and slaves from the Black Sea region. The expansion of trade and industry created a new group of wealthy individuals in many of the Greek city-states. These men wanted a political power but found it difficult to gain because of the power of the ruling aristocrats. The landowners would not willingly give up their political power to newly rich merchants. Tyranny in the city-states. Creation of this new group of rich men fostered the rise of tyrants in the 7th and 6th centuries BC. Tyrants were not necessarily oppressive or wicked, as our word tyrant implies. Greek tyrants were rulers who seized power by force from the aristocrats. They were unique in Greek history, and in fact, the Greeks did not have a word for them. The Greek term tyrannus was developed from other language, probably one from Asia Minor. Support for the tyrants came from the newly rich who had made their money in trade and industry. These people were hungry for the social prestige and political influence that aristocrats had denied them. Poor peasants who were in debt to land-holding aristocrats also supported the tyrants. Both the newly rich and the peasants were tired of aristocratic domination of their city-states. The tyrants gained power and kept it by using hired soldiers. Once in power, the tyrants tried to help the poor and launched public work projects. They built new marketplaces, temples, and walls. These efforts glorified the city but, more importantly, increased the tyrants' popularity. Despite their achievements, however, the tyrants eventually came to be seen as oppressive. The tyrants had fallen out of favor by the end of the 6th century BC. Greeks believed in the rule of law, and tyranny was an insult to that ideal. Although tyranny did not last, it played an important role in Greek history. the rule of the tyrants, indeed the rule of the aristocrats in many city-states. The end of tyranny then allowed many new people to participate in government by the people or in the government. In some Greek city-states, this led to the development of democracy, which is government by the people or rule of the many. Other city-states remained committed to the government by an oligarchy rule by the few. So, as nagkawala na ang tyranny, so mas ningboom noon, mas daghan na ninindot noon ang ilang pamaging ilang government, ay kaya ang ilang gi-apply na is democracy, which is a rule of many. So, since wala naman tong mga aristocrat something, ilan tong dissolve din ilang gipulihan og democracy. While ang other nga mga states or cities remained committed to the government by an oligarchy. So oligarchy means rule by the few. So two rival city-states, Sparta and Athens, developed different systems of government. The differences in the Greek city-states can be understood by examining the two most famous and powerful city-states, the Sparta and Athens. Sparta, like other Greek city-states, Sparta needed more land. Instead of starting new colonies as some states did, the Spartans conquered the neighboring Laconians. Later, beginning around 730 BC, the Spartans undertook the conquest of neighboring Messenia despite its larger size and population. After the conquest, the Messenians and Laconians became serfs and were made to work for the Spartans. These captured people were known as helots, a name derived from Greek word for capture. To ensure control over the conquered helots, the Spartans made a conscious decision to create military state. Between 800 BC and 600 BC, the lives of Spartans were rigidly organized and tightly controlled. Thus, our word Spartan meaning highly self-disciplined. Males spent their childhood learning military discipline. Then they enrolled in the army for a regular military service at age 20. Although allowed to marry, they continued to live in the military barracks until age 30. All meals were eaten in public dining halls with fellow soldiers. Meals were simple. The famous Spartan black broth consisted of a piece of pork boiled in animal blood, salt, and vinegar. A visitor who ate some of the black broth once remarked that he now understood why Spartans were not afraid to die. At 30, Spartan males were allowed to vote in assembly and live at home, but they stayed in the army until the age of 60. While their husbands live on the barracks, Spartan women live at home. Because of this separation, Spartan women had greater freedom of movement and greater power in the household than was common elsewhere in Greece. Spartan women were expected to remain fit to bear and raise healthy children. Many Spartan women upheld strict Spartan values, expecting their husbands and sons to be brave in war. The story is told of a Spartan mother who, as she handed her son in his shield, told him to come back carrying his shield or being carried in it. In other words, he was not to drop his shield in retreat but to be victorious or to die bravely. The Spartan government was an oligarchy headed by two kings who led the Spartan army on its campaigns. A group of 5 men known as the Ephors were elected each year and were responsible for all the education of youth and the conduct of all citizens. A council of elders composed of the two kings and 28 citizens over the age of 60 decided on the issues that would be presented to an assembly made up of male citizens. This assembly did not debate, it only voted on the issues. To make their new military state secure, the Spartans turned their backs on the outside world. Foreigners who might have brought in new ideas were discouraged from visiting except for military reasons. Spartans were not allowed to travel abroad where they might encounter ideas dangerous to the stability of the state. Likewise, Spartan citizens were discouraged from studying philosophy and literature or the arts. The art of war was the Spartan ideal. All other arts were frowned upon. Everyday art in Athens. The Greeks made pottery for every possible use. The best Greek pottery came from Athens because the clay found there was easy to take in a clean. At first, the pottery was decorated with geometric shapes. Later, scenes from everyday life, stories of gods, wars, and Olympic events decorated the pottery. Before 500 BC, the pottery was red with figures that appeared black after they were baked. After 500 BC, craftsmen discovered how to create red figures on black background. The calyx. So, calyx was a type of two-handled drinking cup. Potters decorated the inside and outside of the calyx. Next, the crater. The crater was wide-mouthed, mixing bowl used to mix water with wine. The most popular beverage with meals. A special crater on a stand was part of the wedding ceremony. This red-figured crater depicts the winner of a music contest. Athens. By 700 BC, Athens had become a unified police in the peninsula of Attica. Early Athens was ruled by a king by the 7th century BC. However, Athens had become an oligarchy under the control of aristocrats. These aristocrats owned the best land and controlled political life. The assembly of all the citizens had few powers. Near the end of the 7th century BC, Athens faced political turmoil because of serious economic problems. Many Athenian farmers were sold into slavery when they were unable to repay their debts to their aristocratic neighbors. Over and over, there were cries to cancel the debts and give land to the poor. Civil war seemed likely. The ruling Athenian aristocrats reacted to this crisis in 594 BC by giving full power to Solon, a reform-minded aristocrat. Solon cancelled all land debts and freed people who had fallen into slavery for debts. He refused, however, to take land from the rich and give it to the poor. Despite Solon's reforms, aristocrats were still powerful, and poor peasants could not obtain land. Internal strife finally led to the very thing Solon had hoped to avoid, the tyranny